So who am I? I'm Adam James. I am an award-winning journalist formerly, and this is important for the purposes of this webinar. So as a journalist, I have dealt with everything from physical abuse allegations to mischievous social media comments. I'm also founder of Springup PR. We like to call ourselves the UK's #1 care operator, PR and marketing powerhouse. Now, this webinar is going to look at two things specifically before the negative story actually gets published. 90% of this webinar is going to focus on that. And at the very end, we're going to dig into and talk about what to do after that negative story gets published. So let's talk about the before. What are the scenarios that you as a care provider are most likely to come across? And again, this is mainly for regional, but can also be national. So it's likely to be around family complaints or allegations to which they bring or make to the press. And it can also be bad CQC reports. You can see some examples on the screen here, my cursor. These are the kinds of stories that if they are online, ladies and gentlemen, they will stay there forever, which is why if you are going to have a bad story coming out about your care home, it's important to try and minimize the damage. That's largely what we're going to be talking through on this webinar, to minimize reputational damage and the negativity in a story. So here is a real life family complaint. This is real life. This happened a while back. This is the email that came in to this particular care provider. Hello, and I want to read it because it's important. This is a real life scenario. This is the kind of thing that happens. I am a reporter for, I've left out the name of the newspaper. I've been contacted by a man whose mother has been a resident at the so-and-so care home in the area. The lift at the care home only works occasionally, said the man, the son, meaning that she, the mother, is often stranded upstairs for weeks at a time. The son has contacted management at the care home, including the MD, but had no response to his concern over the lift. His request for a plan or of action for a permanent fix to the broken lift. Can I get a comment from the home on this case? Is the company aware of the issues with the lift at the care home? And what does the company plan to do to address this promptly? Hope to hear from you. Best wishes, Jack. It's called the journalist Jack. But that's how it came in to the care provider. Pretty alarming. In the journalist's mind, this is a great story. Now, as I said from the top, I'm a former journalist. If this story had arrived on my plate, my eyes would be open, my ears would be flapping. Why? Because I've got this headline in my mind, stranded upstairs for weeks at a time. I put that in colour because I wanted to emphasize that's the most killer quote that this son has given this particular journalist. And I can see the headline. If I was a journalist, my headline would be, son of resident at care home claims she has been stranded at the first floor of her home and unable to access the rest of the care home. That would be the headline I would write as a journalist. So it could have very severe reputational damage to the care home if that comes out in the press. So what to do? What to do when you get this kind of journalist knocking at the door, this kind of allegation coming to you via journalists? And this same principle applies to regional or national. And here's 6 things you must be aware of or must do. So straight from the top, contact the journalist fast via phone. Yes, contact the journalist fast. You want to be speaking with them as soon as possible. And then use the off-the-record technique. So here's how it goes. Hi, Jack. I've got your email about these, that you've had these allegations about so-and-so care home. I'm ringing from so-and-so care home. I'd like now to spend a few minutes talking with you about it. Is it okay if we have an initial off-the-record chat about it? The journalist 9 times out of 10 will say yes. Why? Because they want to speak to you. And they should, if they're a good journalist, honour the off-the-record promise that they're giving you. So therefore, use that technique because you want to have a frank and open conversation with the journalist that is off the record. That's the way to go. And then the key here is number 3, once you're doing that, is find out everything that the journalist knows. Get crystal clear. This is you finding out all the facts, because only once you know all the facts that, in this case, let's go back to it, the son has told the journalist, only then can you come up with a holding statement. I'll come to that in a moment. So in this particular case, I took this call and I was speaking to the journalist and said, okay, I would like to know exactly what allegations were made. Were there other allegations made? You're saying stranded upstairs for weeks at a time. Is that a direct quote from the son, journalist, Jack? What other allegations were made? Why am I asking that question? I'll tell you why, because sometimes a journalist will not give you via email all the allegations that a complainer made. So I want to make sure that I've got all the allegations that are made, because sometimes it happens that a journalist will write a story where the allegations that were not made to you were actually written in the piece. So that's why you want to check. You want to start to have a little bit of control here. I'd also want to know when this son contacted the management at the home. What date? Was it by email or was it by phone? Has the journalist got records of those contacts that were made by the son to the management at the home? If not, why not? So you're doing a little bit of probing your side just to get the fact. These are the kinds of things that you must be doing off the record to get the complete lowdown on exactly what the journalist knows, and the journalist has a duty actually to tell you. He or she has a duty to tell you. A fourth point is be helpful. You want the journalist to have your ear. I always say, look, journalist Jack, we're here to help you. We will be giving you a holding statement, but please can I just ask a few more questions? So be helpful. And then point 5, get a deadline for a statement. So the journalist has asked you for a statement or a comment. Great, you will provide that, but you need to know exactly when the deadline for that statement is. Is it within 2 hours? Is it within 2 days? Or is it within 2 weeks? I've come across a whole load of those scenarios, because once you know the deadline for a statement, that gives you a breathing space to actually then come up with a statement, a holding statement. I'll come on to that in a moment, on what to convey to the journalist. And then you promise that journalist, point 6, that a statement will be provided, and it will be provided by the deadline. Remember, at the bottom here, journalists have a duty to get responses from both sides. So this gives you, in a time when you might feel very panicky and out of control about this situation where you've got this terrible story coming out in the press and the journalist is preparing for it, you are gaining a little bit of control here, because remember, the journalists have a duty to get responses from both sides, especially if they are serious allegations, which this one is. So then you produce a holding statement. A holding statement is when you send them a certain number of words via email. And on that holding statement, you want to make sure, again, you are doing these 5 things. A, you're crystal clear on the facts. You want to make sure the facts are accurately conveyed to the journalist, because remember, the journalist has only got one side of the story. And to be honest, if you did wrong, you just have to apologize. It happens with bad CQC reports, particular. They come out and you just have to admit that things have gone wrong. Apologies are a great way to go. If you've done something wrong, admit it. Don't be defensive, particularly around bad CQC reports. It doesn't work well. Any reader will always be the CQC as opposed to you. And 4th point, this is really important. Don't mention details of residence in your holding statement. So for this lift example that we've been talking about, any holding statement wouldn't go into the ins and outs of this particular resident. Why? Because your duty as a care provider is to protect their privacy. Now, whereas the journalist and the relative may go to the press and write about it, or choose to talk about it publicly in the press, you want to maintain that higher moral ground, if you like, by not mentioning details specific to a resident. And the 5th point, you want to be explaining your side of the story. Now, just remember, this statement enables you to regain some control. It's your chance to tell your side of the story. And it also means that a holding statement means you do not have to do a live interview via phone or camera or radio, and getting into the risky situation where you might get caught out by not answering a question quite as well as you would hope. Worst case scenario. The worst case scenario, in my opinion, not always, most of the time, is when you don't give a response to an article that's going to be in the press. And here's a couple of examples. Let me see if I can go here. Hopefully they're still here. Yes, they are. So this is a bad CQC report, not good, nothing much that can be done. The press does cover bad CQC reports, but just look at the end. This journalist would have approached the care home to get their side of the story, or rather a response. But look, Lancashire Live has approached Clitheroe Care Home for comments on the findings of the CQC report. Opportunity missed. Why? Because, well, obviously the care home didn't respond when this particular journalist approached them. B, with a CQC report, by the time it got to the press, the care home would have done a whole load of remedial actions to improve and act on those suggestions that were made by the CQC. So it's a chance to say, yep, these things have happened, but we've done a whole load of elements, including an action plan, to get everything sorted. So you can bring out the positive. Look at that, doesn't look good at all. Same again for here. This is a classic example whereby the national media pick up on the private UK care homes and the profit margins, etc. And a number of providers were under the spotlight here: Barchester, Runwood, and Avery Healthcare. So you read the article. It quotes a number of people. It's not particularly favourable to private care operators. But look what happens at the end. Barchester obviously did give their statement. It was probably a written statement, and there it was. So Barchester have talked about how they were spending their money on investments of 56 million in capital expenditure, improvements to our services. So they are giving their side of the story. And that looks pretty favourable to them. At least that they are giving their side of the story. Compare that to Avery Healthcare and Runwood Homes, decline to comment. Who looks best on that? So going back here, always respond. Don't leave it, don't ignore it, and don't say no comment. It doesn't usually work out well. Second real life scenario. 2 staff charged as a real life scenario. Once again, any questions, please put them in chat. 2 staff charged with neglect after taking nude photos of residents. The care operator terrified, of course, and rightly so, about this going to the press. It could be a devastating blow to the reputation of the care operator and occupancy. No other way of framing this. This does not look good. Now, remember, these staff were charged. It's not yet gone to court, so it's not yet being written about by court reporters. But in the second life scenario, why put together a holding statement? Well, again, the negative press could happen any time because the families of these residents who had their new photos taken, which is horrendous, could go to the press at any time about this. So the holding statement means you can start, for the care operator, start to reduce anxiety, because at least they know they've got something in preparation for when the press, if they do, come knocking. So this again is a real life holding statement for this particular care operator. I just want to highlight some elements to it. See where my cursor is. A, it comes from a named person. B, human. Now, look what's some of the points made here. It acknowledges that the management and the staff at the care home are appalled and shocked about the incident. Of course they would be. These 2 members of staff were quickly dismissed, of course, as you would do. the incident, third paragraph here where my cursor is, the incident has been particularly distressing, upsetting for residents, and the home, of course, is actively assisting police in their investigations. And moreover, the home has also done positive things in light of this terrible incident. They've been obviously in contact with their county council, who've carried out their own investigation. Plus, it's gone to the CQC. The statement also emphasizes here, where my cursor is, at no point was the home given the slightest indication that the two ex-members staff would take the actions that they did. And also, again, up here, the county council, again, did not find the care home wanting in any way. So you're giving a more balanced, and you are giving the reaction that the home has taken to this terrible, terrible incident. And also here, just note, the statutory recognition of our services does not, however, minimize the shock we, as an otherwise trusted care home provider, feel over the incident. Moreover, an added safeguard was given, which was that carers should not carry mobile phones when on duty. Any press that come knocking now, this holding statement, which can be edited at any time, is there in preparation. What happens, by the way, I've got a couple of minutes left to these stories. Well, this lift one, the first real life scenario again, the story never ran. And why is that? Well, I don't know, but there could be one reason, which was when I was speaking to the journalist, I did emphasize to the journalist that, by the way, journalist Jack, if you to claim that a resident has been stranded upstairs is a serious allegation. And I gave the journalist an off-the-record briefing to show actual facts this particular resident had been offered somewhere an alternative room. The lift had been broken, but had been offered an alternative room. So it was a little bit more complicated than originally the story might have been seen by the journalist. So we want to convey the nuances of the story. But also, perhaps the journalist dropped this story because the management ended up having a conversation with the son, and maybe the son dropped the allegation. Not sure, but the story never ran. So it might have been one of those interventions that we did. For the news photo charge, again, that never went to court. So therefore, the court reporters never wrote about it, wasn't picked up. However, remember, the family could have gone to the press at any time. What happens next after the bad news has been published? So we've given you examples of how it's been prevented, but B, when you've got that holding statement, your side of the story is being conveyed. So what happens next? Let's say the negative story has run, you have to take the hit, there's not so much you can do about it, but you have minimalized the damage in any way you can, using these holding statements and off-the-record conversations, etc. What do you do next? Well, that's when you recover. You draw up a plan to recover any reputational damage. And this may include doing proactive PR and getting positive ongoing press coverage to outbalance those negative stories. So, by the way, if you want any help on that, you see that photo of a webinar, previous webinar, how to get guaranteed ongoing press coverage for your accounts to showcase your care quality. Go and have a click on that and you'll be able to see that. It's also on our YouTube channel.